Hello there. Before we get started on today's episode, I'd like to ask a short favor. If you're interested in either of the two books that I have written and am about to release, head on over to my website at theanxioustruth.com/books. There you can learn about both books, one of which is free, and you can get on my mailing list to be notified when each book is released and how you can get it. I would really appreciate that. Okay, let's get rolling. Welcome, dudes and dudettes. Welcome to episode 99 of the podcast. 99. So the next one's going to be a big one. It'll be number 100. I have no idea what I'm going to do. What I thought I was going to do sort of fell through, so I'm going to make it up as I go along, like I usually do. Won't be a problem, though. It's going to be good. Okay, so this one, episode 99, this one is entitled The Habit of Words. And we're going to talk about the way we talk about our anxiety problems. So when we develop these disorders that I'm always addressing, panic disorder, agoraphobia, health anxiety, OCD, that sort of stuff, we start to develop habits in the way we describe the condition, the way we talk about the condition. This involves verbally, overtly to other human beings, silently in our own heads to ourselves, and in writing on the internet, Facebook groups, forums, things like that. We develop habits in the way we talk about this problem. And those habits matter. These are important things because the way we talk about it, it's a big part of how we engage with the disorder, right? So we need to look at what those habits are, and we need to start to learn how to recognize what our habits of words are in relation to our anxiety, and to know when we're in good habits that promote recovery and when we have developed bad habits that keep us stuck. So that's what we're going to talk about today. What I want to get into first is a question. Now, I asked this question in my Facebook group a few days ago, and I got an avalanche of answers, some of which I didn't expect. So we're going to talk about some of those. But the question is, if you had to sit for a second and pause this podcast and think for a minute to yourself, I would like you to think about how often you are talking about being anxious, how you feel, what symptoms you're experiencing, how scary it is, how hard it is, and how much you want it to go away. How much time do you spend saying those things out loud to other human beings that hear them, silently to yourself, or pounding on a keyboard on your phone or a keyboard, writing those things on the internet? Like if you really took a second and paused the recording for a second, pause the podcast and really think about that. I think if you are honest with yourself, you may discover that you are spending an inordinate amount of time talking about that. And I want to address this first. This is the natural bad habit that people with anxiety disorders develop. This is super common. Most people develop that bad habit of words, which is too many words. It's just too many words. You may find that you are constantly either thinking about how you feel, thinking about anxiety, wondering about it. Why is this happening? Why do I feel like this today? Why won't it go away? Or just expressing, oh, my heart feels funny. I have a pain in my shoulder. I feel like I'm going crazy. This is terrible. I think my stomach is a little off. Like, how much time do you spend literally just saying how you feel and thinking about how you feel and writing about how you feel? If that is the default habit of words that develop when somebody develops one of these anxiety disorders and gets into the thick of it, that becomes the default, Let's talk about why that becomes the default. If you are spending an inordinate amount of your time every waking moment either thinking about that silently to yourself, talking about it, writing about it on the internet, whatever it is, and you are just renumerating again and again and again, everything you feel, everything you fear, everything you're experiencing, you're saying them out loud, you're thinking them to yourself repeatedly, you're typing them on the internet to your friends online. If you're doing that, the reason why you're doing that is to seek assurance. That is a safety behavior. So you think by saying the things out loud, you are seeking the reassurance of somebody who will tell you, oh, I had that too, it's okay. Or you're putting it out there just so that somebody else knows what you're feeling, just in case. Now, the reassurance seeking and the need to want to be soothed and comforted, that's common sense. People understand that. So the reason why you go around talking about how you feel all day long to any human who will listen for 30 seconds is because you're trying to you want somebody to soothe you and make you feel better, make this better. And most people understand that. Like, that makes sense. That is a reassurance seeking behavior. But in the end, reassurance seeking is safety seeking, right? Or even comfort and soothing. When you're seeking comfort and soothing by throwing those words out there all the time and hoping to hear something comforting in return, that is also an avoidance behavior. It's an avoidance and safety behavior, and it lends credence to the mistaken idea that you must be comforted against this thing. Now, I understand how uncomfortable and scary being in the thick of these problems can be. I was there. I understand what that feels like. But you have to recognize that you're not only out there to seek comfort and soothing. The idea that you need to be comforted from anxiety is part of the thing that cements that cognitive disconnect, that cognitive error that says this is a horrible thing against which I must brace and from which I must be saved. But let's talk about the other reason why you may walk around, verbalizing, writing about, thinking about everything you feel as you go about your day. That is a safety behavior that says I must tell somebody what's going on here so that if it turns into the worst case, they'll know and they can save me. Now that one is more subtle, and most people don't realize that they're even doing that, or they're a little bit embarrassed to admit that that's why they're doing it. But if you're going to sit quietly, I can't see you. This is audio only. If you want to turn off the podcast for a second and really think about that and look yourself in the mirror, I think you may discover that I do that. Not only do I want somebody to tell me it's okay and I want to be soothed and comforted and made to feel better. And, we'll talk about why that's a mistake too, but not only do I want to be soothed and comforted and made to feel better, but I also secretly, I think I'm being slick here, I want to throw it out there. And sometimes people get into the habit of just tossing it out casually. Like the people around you may start to get tired of hearing you talk about how you feel all the time. So especially if you find yourself just sort of sneaking it in casually, trying to make it seem like I'm just throwing it out there, it's not really bothering me. Really, you're throwing it out there for a reason. And most times, if you're going to be honest with yourself, that reason is I'm still worried that this is a thing. I might go crazy or faint or be ill or have a heart attack or a stroke, whatever you're afraid of is going to happen. I'm going to throw this stuff out there so that if in fact it does happen, somebody can save me. You'll know it's happening, so you'll be able to take action to save me. So that's the second reason why the most common habit of words, and what I'm going to call an unhealthy habit of words in relation to an anxiety disorder, that's the second more subtle reason why that one develops most commonly. So why do we not want to do that? We don't want to do that because, again, you are reinforcing the belief in your own brain, not to the people around you or on the internet. Although if you're in an anxiety forum, you may be helping to reinforce someone else's belief that their symptoms are dangerous. But what we really care about for our purposes today is that you continually cement that wrong cognitive link between discomfort, safety, and danger, right? You think, discomfort, fear, and danger. Every time you do that, every time you throw that out there as a potential lifeline, I better throw this thing in the water so that it's out there in case I fall overboard. Every time you do that, and also more subtly, but also every time you throw it out there because you want somebody to soothe it for you, you are sending a signal to your brain, the fear center in your brain, that this really is a terrible, dangerous thing. And we must be comforted. We must be soothed. We must be reassured, and we must be rescued from this. And like that, those signals are what your brain begins to understand. So when you react to the way you feel by just this constant stream of how I feel, I better tell you how I feel. I want to tell you what this is. When you do that all day long, at every chance you get, you are sending a very clear signal to your brain that's already confused about these sensations and symptoms and feelings. It's already confused. It's already gotten the lesson wrong, however long ago, and that's how the disorder developed. You are sending a signal that says, yep, we better stay on alert. And so your brain is happy to oblige, because in the end, the fear center in your brain is doing the job it has evolved to do. It's just doing its job. It thinks it's keeping you safe, right? So this is what you pay me for. This is what I'm going to do it. I'm going to keep you safe. And the way it does that is by continually sending you into fight or flight mode. Brace and fight this thing. Get it the hell out of here when this happens. I got to keep you safe. So every time you continue to talk about I feel this, I feel this, I feel this. I'm afraid of this. This is hard. This is scary. I hate it when it's going to go away. Now I feel this. Now I feel that. Now I'm afraid of this. Now I'm afraid of that. The more you do that, the more you reinforce that your brain must do that job. Don't worry, I got you covered. I'm going to get you away from this. And the way it knows to get you away from that is to jump your heart rate through the roof and make you breathe heavy and make you dizzy and make your legs go like you have to run away. That it thinks it's doing its job. And it is. It's just doing it at the wrong time. It doesn't need to do the job at that moment. It's triggered incorrectly. The natural, normal, measurable response of the human body to fear, it's just triggered in the wrong time. And every time that you talk more at length about how you feel, how do I feel? How do I feel? How do I feel? You're reinforcing that. Like, okay, I just got to stay in alert mode all the time. So that's why this is a bad habit of words. Whether you're writing it on the internet, you're speaking it out loud, or you're thinking it to yourself, that is a habit you have to start to recognize, own. You're doing that. And one of the things that I need you to do is to start reframing this and stop saying things like, I can't get away from it, or it won't let me go. It has me. So again, the words that you use to describe the disorder, to describe your anxiety, it has a hold of me. No, it doesn't have a hold of you. It's not an it, it's you. So start to recognize that habit of words. That's a habit of words we do not want to be in. It's not productive. It's not doing anything. You're looking for temporary relief and safety at the expense of a lifelong problem with this. So you're trading a short-term benefit for a long-term detriment when we do it that way. And that's really hard for some people to come to grips with, especially if you're sort of new to this and you're new along this path to recovery. That's one of the first things that we start pointing out is, hey, for the first little while, you're learning this new way to approach your anxiety and to experience it. For the first little while, that's fine. You keep talking about your symptoms and how you feel, but very quickly, and if you're with a good therapist, they would literally do this to you in a session. At some point, your therapist would cut you off and say, when you come in this office, you're not allowed to say that stuff anymore. I'm not listening. We're not talking about that anymore. So you got to get acclimated to the new process, but then at some point you have to own the fact that, like, I talk about this all the time. I talk about this all the time. It's all I talk about all day long. Now, that also there's a consuming information too. And in the case of, your habit of words, you're speaking it out there. You're writing it down, you're speaking it, you're telling yourself, but it goes hand in hand with also consuming information about anxiety. And just briefly, I'll mention that really briefly because it is attached. But if you're speaking about how you feel all the time, speaking about your anxiety problem all the time, consumed with it all the time and verbalizing it all the time, if you're also reading and researching and reading and researching and reading and researching, always checking in with it, that fuels that too. So that's not necessarily a habit of words. It's a habit of consumption of words, if you will. So that's an unhealthy habit of words. Let's talk about how you would counter that. Like what's the healthier habit of words when it comes to, trying to go down the road to recovery from these disorders? Really, the healthiest thing that you can start to do is to just stop talking about it. And you can develop a new vocabulary and a new way to talk about it when you do. But even when you do develop this new phraseology, this new vocabulary, your new way of describing things, you will find that you're talking about it less. So you're talking about it differently, and you have to learn how to do that. New habits have to develop over time. That's difficult, takes time and practice, right? You'll make mistakes here and there. That's okay. But more than anything else, you're going to cut down the frequency. So what we always tell people to do is, first thing you have to do is just stop saying what you're saying. You have to stop saying it. So that literally means inserting a pause. Sometimes that helps. Like the next time you want to pick up your phone and text your anxiety friend to let them know, like, oh, I feel so dizzy. Nope. I'm going to put the phone down and I'm going to wait 60 seconds before I do that. And then the next time I'm going to wait 90 seconds. Then I'm going to wait 2 minutes. Then I'm going to wait 3 minutes and 5 minutes. And this is how you build the new habit of not saying, not writing, not texting. And that's literally how you would do it. So before you start to build the new vocabulary of how you will talk about these things, you have to start to squash the old vocabulary by simply understanding and not helping me to say these things, so I must not say them for a while. Now, some people get confused. And what I'm going to say is, Inserting the pause is a really good tool. So before you talk about it, before you post about it in your support group, before you tell your wife or your husband or whoever your people are, before you tell them, insert a pause before you say it. Now, during that pause, at first, that pause is just going to feel like torture because you feel compelled. I must tell somebody how I'm feeling. I must do it. Like your brain has convinced you that that's part of the mechanism of being safe, is to talk about it, say it. I'm dizzy. My stomach is upset. I think I'm going to be sick. I might pass out. I can't take the kids to school today. There's no way I can leave the house today. Like those, your brain is going to scream at you. You must say those things. That's part of our way that we stay safe. So at first, just the act of not saying is going to be really difficult. You put that pause in and all you're doing is fighting the urge to just blurt it out because you've built the habit of blurting it out and your brain has got you convinced that you must blurt it out to be safe. So it's going to be difficult. But then as you insert that pause, I want you to start really asking yourself this question. Are these words serving me? What are these words accomplishing if I want to put them out into the world, either to myself and my own brain, or I want to tell my wife what's going on, or I want to tell my girlfriend what's going on, or my boyfriend, or whoever, my partner, my sister, my mother, my coworker, my best friend, whoever. What are these words doing for me? Are they do I just need to tell somebody so that it makes me feel better for this next 5 seconds until I want to say it again? Am I asking them to save me from something I've never, ever needed to be saved from? So you have to start to really challenge those things. Like, what is the purpose of saying these words out into the world? That's an important thing. It's an important realization. So at first you're going to just be fighting the urge to say the words, but as you get a little bit better at that, start to question, well, why did I want to say this to begin with? Let me tell you a story. I first learned that when I was going through like horrific antidepressant withdrawal in 2005 and 2006. And I used to be on a website called Paxil Progress that doesn't exist anymore, unfortunately, but it was tremendously helpful. That website was a lifeline for me while I was going through this disastrous, like hellish, situation. And I started to learn after a while, and I got guilty of it. I would spend hours and hours and hours trolling that site, waiting for new posts. Did anybody post anything new? What's new now? What's new now? What just got put up there? What can I read? Who can I interact with? And I would talk all day long on that forum about how I felt. I felt shaky. I thought my blood sugar was crashing, all of the stuff. I would go through all of the stuff. And after a while, I started to recognize like, well, this is actually making it a little bit worse for me. I can't make myself feel instantly better in that situation I was going through, that readaptation, discontinuation thing. But I did have to start to understand. And there were friends on that forum who would come before me who said, okay, you have to start thinking about like, what good is it doing you to tell us again how you feel? Because we can't fix it for you. We can't change it. Only time is going to do that. So do you want to immerse yourself in this? And it's where I started to learn the difference between pain and suffering, right? Pain is not avoidable sometimes. Suffering is optional. You may have heard that saying. So I learned that when I was going through antidepressant withdrawal, and I had to start to use that technique when I was actually doing the real recovery work to fix my anxiety disorder without medication. I had to do that. And I remembered it from back in those days, like, okay, I have to just stop talking about this. And one day I made that decision. I'm like, I'm never going to tell anybody again how I feel. And it mattered. It really mattered because quickly I started to learn like, hey, I'm not saying this all the time and I'm still fine. I didn't have to tell anybody then. I don't have to tell them now. So over time in practice, like when you start to think about that, like, what am I doing here? All I'm doing is reminding myself that that I don't like it. Well, we know you don't like it. You know you don't like it. You don't have to keep reminding yourself of that. So that's why you have to first put the brakes on and stop talking about it every waking minute. Start inserting those pauses, start questioning, why do I want to say this again? Why do I want to say this right now? And you're going to find that the answer is like, well, I don't know why I'm trying to say it. Either it's just a habit. It's automatic. I don't even know why I'm doing it anymore. So I'm going to stop doing it. Or I'm doing it because I'm afraid. And I think that somebody's going to save me if I put it out there. Somebody's going to tell me it's okay. But in the end, let's talk about that. I know some people get a little ruffled and they'll say, well, what's wrong with wanting to be comforted and soothed? Like human beings should be comforted. We need to be loved. Okay, that's fine. But the reality is nobody's going to ever fix this problem but you anyway. So what's the point in continually asking the rest of the world to make you feel better? So if you just keep putting those words out there because people will respond to you and say, it's okay, I have that too, it's fine, you're going to be good. You are giving up your responsibility. You are literally handing the power for making it better to the whole rest of the world. And as much as they may love you and want to make it better, in the end, they can't. In the end, they can't make it better. Only you can make it better. So that's the other reason why you got to stop doing that, like, please comfort me thing. Because all you're really doing is you're handing away the keys. You already have the keys to recovery in your hand. You're giving them to somebody else and say, here, you drive this car. And they can never drive you where you want to go. Only you can drive the car where it needs to go. So that's all the reasons why you have to recognize the unhealthy habit of words, of saying, of talking, of writing. Recognize it and start to take steps to cut down on the amount of time that you just throw those things out there. Those are just saying things. They're not action things. So that's going to move us on to the next thing, which is, how do I replace that? Right? So, okay, fine. I've owned it. I talk about this far too much. Maybe your friends and family have told you that. Maybe your therapist has told you that. You talk about this too much. I heard people in the Facebook group respond to my question about this with one person said, my therapist told me I was addicted to anxiety. And they thought that was ridiculous. And then they went home and said, can you believe that the therapist said I'm addicted to anxiety? And this person's partner said, oh, no, you totally are. You talk about it all the time. And it was like, boom, light bulb moment, right? So your friends and family may already be kind of like giving you the eye roll and walking away from you when you do it. If that's happening, that's a good indicator that you have gone way down the road into the bad habit of words. If the people that love you and care for you are starting to like tune you out, instead of getting angry that they won't listen to you anymore, understand why. Like, what you're doing is quite pointless in their eyes, and they are correct. And then they can't help you anyway. So use that. That's the reason why we don't want to go for soothing and comfort. Like, you're giving away your power to the rest of the world. Like, keep it, use it. So how do we do that? What do we do? Let's start to talk about the new phraseology, the new lexicon, the new way we're going to talk about this stuff. You do want to talk about it. It's totally fine. You have friends and family, you have therapists, you have helpers, you have your support groups online, whatever it is. You should be able to talk about these things. That's great, but we should talk about them productively. So the better way to start to talk about these things is this. There's two ways to go. You could just say, oh my God, look at the difference between these two statements. Oh my God, I woke up this morning. It's horrible. It was right in my face again. I don't know why this is happening. I can't get out of bed. There's no way I'm going to be able to get through today. I hate this. It's never going to get better. I think I must be broken. Something is wrong. Like, listen to that statement and then listen to it the way that maybe I would have made it once the light bulb went off for me and I was actually working toward recovering. I would say, well, it's here again this morning and I hate this, but it always gets better if I get out of bed and start doing my day and execute my routine. I won't like it. I'm going to be super uncomfortable. I'm terrified right now, but I know I'm okay. So let me get rolling. And in that case, the people who are listening to you might say, you could do this. Get out of bed, start doing your stuff. Let us know how you're doing. We're going to cheer for you. Do you see the difference? Like, I acknowledge that, like, I feel really badly right now. I'm afraid. I'm frustrated. I'm tired of this, but I'm going to do this stuff anyway. Can you guys help to cheer me on? That's a very, very different statement. You are hanging on to the power there and saying, I'm going to do this anyway. Even though I don't want to do it, I hate to do it. I'm afraid to do it. I'm going to be uncomfortable when I do it, but I know that I have to do this. You're acknowledging your state. There's nothing wrong with that. But then you are literally getting back in its face and saying, but I know this has never hurt me and I'm going to go forward and do this stuff anyway so I can learn new lessons. So you are now turning toward the fear instead of away from it. You're not running from it, and you're not hoping that the people in your life will shoot it in the head while you run away from it, because that never happens. They shoot it in the head. It comes back 30 seconds later, right? So in this case, now you're going to turn toward it and get right up in its grill, and you're going to start that process of unlearning the fear, as difficult as that may be. But just see the difference between those two statements. I can't. I hate it. This is terrible. It's got me again. What responses do you get from that? Like, you normally will get like, oh, I'm sorry. That's terrible. No one understands how bad it is. Those are passive, non-action statements. They're meant to soothe and comfort, and they might temporarily, for a minute or two at a time. They reinforce bad cognitive connections, and they give you nothing to step up on, to go on. Build yourself a step to get up on so you could step up and go and move. And you could build that step out of words. So your new lexicon should start to be, acknowledge my state, but now say what I'm going to do about it. Or even ask, hey guys, what should I do about this? I know I can't just sit in it. I'm feeling this way. I'm not sure what I should do. What can I do today? What can I do to make some progress today? That's okay. That's a smart way to talk about it. That's the way you want to start to learn to talk about it. And you'll find that when you do that, you start to make improvements overall. You just need to talk about it less and less anyway. So not only will you be talking about it in a different way, you'll be talking about it less than you always did. So that habit of words becomes a healthy, recovery-focused habit of words. So we've wiped out the unhealthy habit of words, and we've changed it into a healthier way to talk about it, think about it, write about it, and discuss it. And the healthier habit of words has a completely different set of words and phrases and lexicon. It's action-oriented, it's results-oriented, it's goals-oriented, and the frequency is lower. So that's the difference. That's the habit of words that you want to start to develop. So like in a nutshell, really what this is all about is you got to learn to stop talking about it passively and just saying what you feel. And you have to start talking about it in a more active state. I feel this way and I'm going to do this, or I feel this way. Can somebody tell me what I should do now, what I can do now? And then you learn, right? So the good habit of words leads towards learning and advancement. So that's kind of the biggest habit of words that I want to talk about, that, how you talk about it, the frequency, then changing the way, lower frequency, and changing the way, a more positive action oriented way you talk about it. I want to address something else though, that came up in my thread. And for those of you that hung in there all this time waiting for this, I appreciate it. Some people develop a different unhealthy habit of words. And that unhealthy habit of words is suffering in dead silence. Like, I just spent the last 26 minutes telling you how you shouldn't talk about how you feel and talk about your anxiety all day long. But you also don't have to just shut up forever. So there are some people, although in the minority, you might be one of them, that chooses to suffer completely in silence. That's not healthy either. So I don't know what the motivation is necessarily behind that. That was not my personal experience, like wanting to be silent about it completely, but some people do prefer to be completely silent. They tell nobody. I'm not going to tell anybody how I'm feeling. I'm not going to tell anybody what I'm struggling with. And that I understand that there might be a bit of self-reliance there, and that I can completely relate to. I get that. I want to do things myself. I want to do them. But I think what happens there is if you're in the habit of just silently suffering and never, ever talking about it, never discussing it, never asking for help, then you run the risk of building your own image of what's going on in your head that might not necessarily be well-informed, because we know that anxious thoughts are distorted thoughts. So you're being governed by anxiety and fear and irrationality. You will build a model in your head of what's going on and what you think you should be doing in a vacuum with no productive, right? With no productive feedback from the outside world. So in a way, developing the bad habit of continually having verbal diarrhea about your anxiety, you don't want to go that way, but it does get you productive feedback that can help you break the habit. When you just suffer completely silently and don't talk to anybody, you don't have a therapist, you don't tell your friends, your family, nobody, you're just completely quiet about this thing that you're doing. You're shutting yourself off from potential avenues of assistance, of help, of suggestions, of different ways to look at the problem. So if that's you're listening to me and no one knows you listen to this anxiety podcast. You try and hide it from the world. Rethink that a little bit. Pick a few people that you could start to tell. Like, look, I'm having this problem. I've been having it for 6 months. I don't know what it is. I'm scared. I'm not making any progress. I don't know what to do. You're welcome to join the Facebook group. There's always a link on my website. theanxioustruth.com/links gets you to that. If you're not sure who to talk to, come and join the group. Talk about it. We'll talk about it with you. No problem. But there's no need to suffer in complete silence either. There's no nobility in that. So you don't have to just be completely silent and just power through it because you think that's just the way to go. I will tell you that I have seen more men than women do that. And I think that might be a gender roles thing. And we'll talk about that in some episode down the road ways. But that's not a good strategy. That's also an unhealthy habit of words, which is no words. It's okay. It's okay to talk about this thing. It's healthy to talk about it. Ask for help, ask for direction. Where can I go to learn about this? Who can help me with this? It's okay to talk about it. Because you shouldn't just suffer silently. So that's the other unhealthy habit of words that we need to break. And again, when you start to break that habit and you end your silent suffering, you're working toward the same goal as the verbal diarrhea crowd, like a sane frequency of discussion as opposed to the dominant discussion every waking moment and you're discussing the problem in productive terms, action-oriented, goal-oriented, learning-oriented terms. So break the silent suffering. You don't have to do that. Learn to talk about this thing productively. It's okay. There's millions of people dealing with this problem right now. You're not the only one. There are places you can go and talk about it. So before we end, I want to address something that does come up when I talk about this. When I tell people, like after a while, being in the Facebook group with 3,000 or 4,000 people, you start to see patterns develop, right? And dealing with the number of people I've dealt with over the years, thousands, you see these patterns. So at first you let the person go because they're new to this and all they know for the last 6 weeks, 6 months, 6 years, 60 years, whatever it's been, all they know is I'm going to go into this room full of other anxious people and say that I hate this and I'm terrified today. I'm just going to tell everybody that my husband doesn't understand and he's angry with me because I canceled dinner again. Okay. That's not a bad way to start when you first get into a new group and that sort of stuff, or you start going down a new road toward recovery. That's all right. But after a while, we start to see that you have to start to point out to this person, okay, it's been a few weeks. Look around you in the group, see how everybody's talking about this. Do you notice that people don't generally talk about their anxiety the way you are all the time? Like these are people down the road. They're ahead of you on the path. Look at the way they talk about it. And you start to broach that. Like, hey, we got to start thinking about changing the way you talk about this. Some people get really upset on an emotional level. And I've been questioned on this and asked point blank, are you telling me that I am not allowed to talk about how I feel anymore? And that's actually a confused question, because what they're asking, they're somehow thinking that what I'm saying, or with another helper, somebody who's down the road to recovery, somebody who's trying to help them or lead the way, they think that this person thinks that they're being told to just shut up. They're never allowed to discuss how they feel ever again, which is not what anybody is saying. Nobody is ever saying that you have to just squash your feelings and your emotions forever. You're not allowed to talk about your emotions or your feelings. You could just be silent. It's not at all what we're saying. The reason why I say that's a confused question is because a person who is in the grips of a raging anxiety disorder doesn't understand the difference between emotional expression and everything becomes anxiety and fear. So if you lose a loved one, that's a terrible situation. It's going to impact you emotionally. There's mourning, there's grief, there's loss, there's anger. There's a bunch of stuff that comes with that. You need to be able to talk about those things. Human beings need to be able to express those things and work through them with other human beings. That's healthy. The problem is, at the moment, you experience everything as anxiety and fear. So if you suffer a loss, there's grief and all of those things, but it immediately morphs into, how is this going to make me feel in terms of anxiety? Is it going to make me afraid? Is this going to make all those terrible symptoms happen? A fight with your partner, problem with your kids, it'll blow up at work, money troubles, whatever it is. I'm not saying that you're never supposed to talk about your life struggles ever again, or that you're not allowed to express your emotions. I would never say that to anybody. But understand that you probably have your emotional responses and your fear responses completely tangled up in a big ball of yarn right now. So to you, you think that saying that your heart is racing again and you're afraid, I had some irregular heartbeats, I'm terrified. What do you think caused that? That has nothing to do with grief or loss or anger or disappointment or anything like that. That is your anxiety speaking. That's the fear speaking. That's not the emotion speaking. So just be really clear and try and understand that nobody's telling you that you must shut up and stuff your feelings and your emotions. You're not allowed to express yourself anymore. That's not what anybody's ever telling you. But we are trying to point out is that you're not necessarily expressing yourself. All you're doing is telling everybody how you feel physically, what you're afraid of, and why you can't do things. That's different. That's different. And when you learn to speak about it differently, the frequency that the amount of time that you spend talking about it and the way you talk about it changes and more productive, you start moving down the road to recovery, you'll start to get clear on that. Like, oh, now I get it. I wasn't talking about my feelings. I was just saying how I feel. There's a difference between talking about your feelings and just saying what you feel. Two different things. And they get jumbled up for people who are in the thick of the anxiety problem. So I wanted to address that because some people hear me say this and they just think, oh, this guy's crazy. He's telling me to just shut up. I'm not allowed to express myself. No, you're clearly allowed to express yourself, and everybody would encourage you to express yourself. You just have to start to understand how these disorders, how this anxiety, this fear-driven thing that you're living in right now, how that distorts what that means. And we're trying to eliminate that distortion, get you back to a more normal place then you'll see it starts to become clear again. Like, oh yeah, okay, I understand. Little Johnny is making me crazy because he's in trouble at school again. I can talk about that. But what I can't talk about is that I got a call from the principal at the elementary school. My kid got in trouble again. And now I'm freaking out. Not saying just kid things, whatever it happens to be. But if you're listening to me right now, I think you could probably relate to that. I got a call from the school. There was a problem, or I got an argument with my boss, or something happened at work, or I just found out we're a little short of cash or something like that. I'm freaking out. How many times have you said that? I'm freaking out. So just going to the I'm freaking out part is not healthy. That's what we're trying to stop. I'm trying to get you back to the point where you could say like, we're really short of cash this month. It's really stressful. What are we going to do? Let's make a plan. I hate this. I wish it was better. What can we do to make it better? That's productive expression of stress and things, not just I'm freaking out. Because at this point you may be in a situation where everything gets you to I'm freaking out, whatever it is. Doesn't matter what it is. Like, oh, I might have to go out to dinner in 2 weeks. You might say in a healthy discussion about your emotions, well, it makes me uncomfortable because I am socially conscious and I'm afraid people are judging me, whatever it is, or I don't like those people that we're going to go to dinner with because he's very insulting to me. Like those are productive discussions, not, oh no, we made dinner plans and I'm freaking out. How am I going to do this? That's not a productive discussion. That's just the fear. You're just saying the fear again. All right. So I wanted to address that. And there we go. So that's about 36 minutes at this point. I think I went longer than I have been in the recent podcasts, but I think this is important. The habit of words matters. The habits that we build that are unhealthy or standing in the way of making progress, understanding them, recognizing them, owning them, taking responsibility for them, and working actively to change them, it matters. So the habit of words is a big one. The way we express ourselves about our anxiety problem is a huge part of how we interact with the disorder. And how we interact with the disorder matters. It's a big, big, big deal. So there you go. All right, I'm going to wrap this one up. We'll be back again. Let's see. Next week should be episode 100. I'll come up with something, like I said. In the meanwhile, if you are listening on iTunes or some podcast network that allows you to rate and review, by all means, please leave a rating or a review. It helps other people find the podcast. I really appreciate that. And what else can I say? I'm going to leave you to let you guys know the intro and outro music. I keep meaning to mention this. This is my friend Ben Drake. And this song is called Afterglow that you guys hear at the beginning and end of every episode. There is an actual connection to this song in the podcast. Ben is awesome. You could find him on Facebook, Ben Drake Music on Facebook. Check him out. He's an amazing musician. And I so appreciate that he has let me use this music. So if you're wondering, what's that intro and outro music? It's called Afterglow by Ben Drake. See you guys next time. It's in these feelings that you never show. Yeah, you're doing fine. It's all around you, you can breathe it in. And this is where your story begins. You got the feeling that you're gonna win. Yeah, you're doing fine. Now in the city and you're living fast. No looking back or dwelling on the past. You know you'll never get another chance.